Hello, my dear friends. There is a word that appears in this week's Parsha that you won't find anyplace else in the Torah, and that word is pasah, which means to spread. Torah uses it in respect to a metzora, which is somebody who has tzaras, which is a certain type of skin affliction. It's not a regular medical condition, but it's some supernatural affliction that comes about as a punishment for speaking lashon hara in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, and the appropriateness of that punishment is that the person who speaks lashon hara isolates the individual who they are talking about from the rest of society, and the punishment therefore is tit for tat. That the person speaking tzaras, he becomes or she becomes isolated, both in terms of because there's a certain natural repulsion to this type of skin affliction, and secondly, halachically, the person who's a mitzvah becomes tameh, becomes impure, and is required to stay outside the camp, isolated from everybody else. So that's an appropriate punishment. So the whether or not the person who has tzaras is tameh or not tameh, whether he's defiled or impure or not, depends on the progression of the tzaras. If it progresses, if it's pasah, if it spreads, then the person becomes tameh. Whereas if it doesn't spread, then under certain circumstances, the person does not become tameh. I think the choice of this word pasah, besides the fact that it's important for to describe the progression of the affliction, but it's so appropriate for tzaras, which is a punishment for speaking lashon hara, because there's two consequences of lashon hara that are make the lashon hara so insidious. The first is the lashon hara spreads. When you say lashon hara, well, you tell one person, you say, don't tell anyone, keep it a secret, and that person decides, okay, I'm only going to tell it to one more person, and that person tells two more, and then two becomes four. It progresses geometrically, and within a very, very short period of time, there could be hundreds of people that have heard the words of lashon hara that spread. So it's just like the tzaras, this affliction has one of the characteristics is that it spreads. It's pasad. So in the same way, lashon hara is pasah as well, and this is particularly true today with social media, where the ability to communicate with hundreds or thousands of people in a few seconds is incredible, and people are constantly forwarding information to each other, and whereas in the old days when you spoke lashon hara, it took a while until it would make its way spread throughout the community. Today it's almost instantaneous. It's incredible, but that's one of the things that lashon hara has it's as if like it has a life of its own. It's because unfortunately people enjoying sharing an interesting piece of gossip, to put somebody down or to show the person's flaws, and therefore it gets repeated over and over. Lashon hara constantly is passed along from one person to the other. So that's pasah. There's another reason why pasah is so appropriate, and that is because not only is the specific lashon hara passed on from one person to the other, but also the influence of speaking lashon hara is contagious. Just like tzaras, well, it's not the spiritual tzaras is not contagious, but physical tzaras, physical leprosy is, people assumed it's contagious. I don't know medically whether it is not, but in any event, when a person speaks lashon hara, it's contagious in the sense that what I do influences other people to do the same thing as well. People say, look, they're talking lashon hara, so you see that it's a normal thing. Even though the Torah says you're not supposed to, but it's like people say it's one of those mitzvahs that if you don't, you don't, but if you do, you do. And if everybody's doing it, so it can't be so terrible. It is terrible because lashon hara literally destroys people's lives. But because it's so common and everybody is engaged in lashon hara to some extent or another, so it just justifies for people the speaking of lashon hara, and this process of I speak lashon hara, so people say, well, if he speaks, I could speak. It's pasah. It spreads rapidly because it creates a societal norm. When some people speak lashon hara, it influences other people to speak lashon hara as well, and before you know it, lashon hara is spread out throughout the community. I think that a very good mashal for what lashon hara is like is the um, pandemic that we've been living with for the last the coronavirus for the last I think it's two years now. Now Baruch Hashem, it's less virulent than it was before, but you remember in the beginning it was so incredibly contagious, and it was passed on from one person to the other, and the results were dire. I mean, we all know people who tragically passed away from the coronavirus, and the virus, it was invisible, you couldn't see it, but it was just incredible how contagious it was and how pervasive it was, and we were all walking around with masks to keep our face covered, and perhaps it was a reminder that when it comes to lashon hara, you have to keep your mouth covered, you have to wear a mask, or you have to give self a mask without a physical mask. But the person has to control themselves, and if not, it's just like the coronavirus. Without masks, the rate of infection is far worse, and that's what happens with lashon hara. If people don't control themselves, both in terms of the severity or the impact of the specific lashon hara, that the more people that find out about it, the more destructive it is. Just like the coronavirus, it just keeps on spreading from one person to the other. And then secondly, in terms of it being contagious, that it influences other people. If I speak lashon hara, they speak lashon hara, and they speak, other people speak, it becomes a societal norm. So the coronavirus is a terrific muscle. So corona became also a societal norm. It became something that we lived with for these past months, and it's just incredible. And that's what happens, is that when people speak lashon hara, in certain cultures, in certain societies, it's normal. I mean, in the secular world, for sure, it's normal. I mean, there's no such thing as lashon hara as an entity. People say whatever is on their mind. They attack each other and make fun of each other. It could be done on radio, on TV, on social media, wherever it is. There's no limitations. There's no withholding anything, and that's the nature of lashon hara, is that people talk and they repeat things, and they influence other people to talk lashon hara as well. And lashon hara is very dangerous, just like the coronavirus is lethal. Lashon hara has the capacity to literally destroy people's lives. I know, any Rav can tell you, I know so many times people approach me and they're so hurt and they're so upset, and then they say they're talking about me, and it can be something trivial, something minor, but people are so, it's so hurtful to know that somebody behind your back is saying something negative. People, they go crazy. They can't sleep for days. They're so irritated and agitated and upset by the fact that somebody is speaking lashon hara about them. So the parsha is a tremendous reminder to us not to speak lashon hara, and I think particular, you look for the word pasah when we learn tomorrow Tazriah. I don't remember how many times, probably around 10 times it's repeated. Keep an eye out for the word pasah, because pasah, it spreads. That describes to a T exactly what lashon hara is. It spreads in terms of the specific lashon hara spreads to others, and as a society, lashon hara spreads. Lashon hara, what one person does has an effect on the other people, and it spreads throughout the society like wildfire.